The first thing every new man noticed wasn't the enemy. It was the weight. Before a shot was fired, before the jungle revealed its dangers, an American infantryman in Vietnam was already carrying a burden that could push 60 pounds, and often much more. Every magazine, every canteen, every grenade, every ration, every piece of gear represented another chance to survive. But in the sweltering heat of Southeast Asia, that same equipment could become its own enemy. Boots rotted, uniforms stayed soaked for days, steel rusted overnight, and packs grew heavier with every mile. Long before combat began, the jungle was already trying to break the men walking through it. By the mid-1960s, the United States had deployed hundreds of thousands of troops into an environment unlike anything most American soldiers had ever experienced. Vietnam's dense rainforests, flooded rice paddies, towering elephant grass, and relentless monsoon seasons challenged nearly every piece of equipment issued by the U.S. Army. Much of the standard field gear had been designed with Europe in mind, where colder climates, established roads, and shorter periods of continuous jungle operations shaped military planning. Vietnam exposed every weakness. Military planners quickly realized that survival in Vietnam depended just as much on equipment as tactics. A rifle that jammed, boots that trapped moisture, or clothing that refused to dry could reduce a soldier's effectiveness long before he encountered enemy forces. The U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps and Natick Laboratories responded with an unprecedented effort to redesign clothing, footwear, load-bearing equipment, and field supplies specifically for tropical warfare. Yet these improvements often arrived only after thousands of men had already learned difficult lessons the hard way. The standard tropical combat uniform appeared simple at first glance. Made from lightweight cotton poplin, later blended with durable ripstop fabrics, it was far thinner than the heavy wool uniforms worn in previous wars. Large cargo pockets allowed soldiers to carry maps, bandages, insect repellent, and extra ammunition without overloading smaller pouches. The fabric dried faster than earlier uniforms, but in Vietnam, faster was a relative term. During the rainy season, clothing could remain damp for days. Humidity hovered near 100%, and sweat soaked every layer within minutes of beginning a patrol. Soldiers often joked that they were never truly dry until they flew home. That constant moisture created more than discomfort. Wet clothing softened the skin, making painful chafing almost unavoidable during long marches. Small blisters quickly became infected in tropical conditions. Fungus flourished inside boots, while insects found easy access through torn sleeves and worn fabric. Men frequently slept in the same soaked uniforms they had marched in all day, because changing clothes simply wasn't practical on extended patrols. A dry uniform was a luxury reserved for rear bases, not the jungle. Footwear proved even more critical. Early in the conflict, some soldiers still received standard leather combat boots that had performed adequately in Europe and Korea. In Vietnam, they became a liability. Leather absorbed water like a sponge, dramatically increasing weight while trapping moisture against the feet. Constant immersion during river crossings and monsoon rains accelerated foot infections, including the dreaded immersion foot, a painful condition that could leave soldiers unable to walk. Recognizing the problem, the Army accelerated development of the now famous jungle boot. Designed specifically for Southeast Asia, it combined black leather with lightweight olive-green canvas uppers that shed water more effectively than full leather construction. Small drainage eyelets near the instep allowed water to escape after crossing streams instead of pooling inside the boot for hours. Thick Panama soles improved traction in mud, while resisting the buildup of sticky clay that often turned ordinary boots into heavy blocks of earth. For many veterans, the jungle boot became one of the most significant improvements of the war, not perfect, but vastly better than what had come before. Even then, the jungle always found new ways to fight back. The combination of heat, moisture, and constant movement wore boots out at an astonishing pace. Soles separated, stitching failed, canvas tore against sharp bamboo, and leather cracked after repeated soaking and drying. Soldiers improvised repairs using parachute cord, electrical tape, and whatever materials were available, knowing replacement boots might not arrive for weeks. Above the boots, socks became almost as valuable as ammunition. Experienced infantrymen learned to carry multiple pairs whenever possible, changing them whenever patrol schedules allowed. Dry socks reduced blisters, slowed fungal infections, and offered rare moments of relief during exhausting operations. Veterans often recalled that receiving clean socks in the field could lift morale far more than outsiders might imagine. Something so ordinary became a reminder of comfort in an environment determined to strip it away. As patrols stretched from hours into days and sometimes weeks, every item added to a soldier's equipment demanded careful consideration. There was no perfect balance between carrying enough supplies to survive and carrying so much weight that movement became painfully slow. Every decision meant compromise. Extra ammunition increased firepower but added pounds. More water reduced dehydration but strained already exhausted shoulders. Additional rations prevented hunger yet occupied precious space inside overloaded packs. In Vietnam, survival often depended on choosing what to leave behind as much as what to carry forward. For the American grunt, the jungle was never simply a battlefield. It was an unforgiving machine that tested every buckle, every stitch, every boot sole, and every ounce carried on aching backs. And as the war continued, soldiers would begin altering, replacing, and even discarding officially issued equipment in favor of whatever actually kept them alive. Every veteran eventually learned the same hard truth. The equipment issued by the Army was only a starting point. The men who stayed alive the longest were often the ones who adapted it. Regulations mattered back at the base. Out in the jungle, practicality almost always won. The centerpiece of every infantryman's load was his weapon. By 1967, the M16 rifle had become the standard firearm for most American combat troops. It was lighter than the older M14, allowing soldiers to carry more ammunition while moving through dense vegetation. On paper, it represented the future of infantry combat. But in its early years, the rifle developed a reputation that haunted the Army. Many soldiers entered Vietnam believing the M16 was nearly maintenance-free. Early training and promotional material suggested the rifle cleaned itself, an assumption that proved disastrously wrong. Combined with changes in ammunition powder and the humid tropical environment, carbon fouling accumulated rapidly inside the weapon. During intense firefights, rifles occasionally failed to extract spent cartridges, leaving soldiers desperately trying to clear jams while under enemy fire. Official investigations later confirmed that a combination of inadequate cleaning equipment, poor logistical decisions, and unrealistic expectations contributed to these failures. The Army responded by distributing improved cleaning kits, chrome plating critical internal components, revising technical manuals, and emphasizing constant weapon maintenance. Before long, cleaning a rifle became almost a ritual. Whenever a patrol paused, soldiers inspected bolts, chambers, magazines, and gas tubes. A dirty rifle was no longer simply untidy. It represented a direct threat to survival. Ammunition added another layer to the burden. Standard doctrine might suggest carrying 200 rounds, but combat rarely followed doctrine. Many infantrymen packed 300 rounds or more, stuffing extra magazines into cargo pockets, claymore bags, bandoliers, and even socks tied around their web gear. The additional weight slowed movement, yet few wanted to be caught running out of ammunition during a prolonged engagement deep in the jungle. The M1956 load-carrying equipment became the framework that held everything together. Cotton web suspenders distributed weight across the shoulders, while a pistol belt supported ammunition pouches, canteens, first aid dressings, entrenching tools, and bayonets. The system had served reasonably well in earlier conflicts, but Vietnam exposed its shortcomings. Cotton webbing absorbed rain, remained wet for long periods, and gradually weakened after repeated exposure to moisture and mildew. Metal buckles rusted, snaps became difficult to open, equipment that functioned perfectly during inspection at base camp often behaved very differently after several weeks in the field. Many soldiers quietly customized their gear. Some removed unnecessary pouches to reduce weight. Others wrapped noisy metal clips with tape to eliminate sounds that might reveal a patrol's position during night movements. Grenades were secured with rubber bands cut from discarded inner tubes, preventing safety pins from snagging on thick vegetation while still allowing rapid access. Small changes like these rarely appeared in official manuals, yet they spread quickly from experienced veterans to newly arrived replacements. Water quickly became the most valuable commodity on any patrol. Vietnam's heat could drain a soldier within hours, especially when climbing steep hills under a full combat load. Most infantrymen carried at least two one-quart canteens, but during long operations, many sought every available space to store additional water. Dehydration reduced alertness, slowed reactions, and increased the risk of heat exhaustion, making water nearly as important as ammunition. Finding safe drinking water, however, presented its own dangers. Rivers and streams often contained bacteria, parasites, or chemical contamination. Purification tablets became standard issue despite leaving an unpleasant chemical taste that many veterans never forgot. Some men preferred boiling water whenever possible, but patrol schedules rarely allowed enough time or enough smoke discipline to build fires. The choice often came down to trusting purification tablets or risking serious illness. Food was another compromise between necessity and practicality. Combat troops depended largely on sea rations, compact canned meals designed to survive rough handling and long storage. Each meal included canned meat or stew, crackers, powdered beverages, instant coffee, chewing gum, and small accessories like matches or toilet paper. While the calories kept men functioning, the menu grew monotonous after weeks in the field. Certain meals became legendary for all the wrong reasons, while others disappeared almost immediately whenever cases were opened, traded among soldiers before patrols even began. To reduce weight, many infantrymen discarded bulky cardboard packaging before leaving base. They reorganized meal components into plastic bags, carrying only what they actually intended to eat. Empty cans were carefully packed out or buried to avoid leaving signs of American positions. Even eating required discipline. The sound of opening a ration tin or the smell of heated food could potentially attract unwanted attention in contested areas. As patrols extended deeper into remote valleys and dense jungle, every ounce became increasingly important. Men constantly evaluated their equipment, asking the same silent question: if I have to carry this for another 10 miles, is it worth the wait? That calculation shaped nearly every decision an infantryman made. In Vietnam, survival wasn't determined by one perfect piece of equipment. It came from dozens of small choices, repeated every single day, under conditions that punished every mistake. By the later years of the war, the average infantryman looked noticeably different from the one shown in official training manuals. Helmets were covered with camouflage bands holding insect repellent. Cigarette packs, first aid dressings, photographs from home, and handwritten reminders of the days left in country. Some painted slogans or unit insignia on their helmet covers, while others kept them plain to avoid drawing attention. These small personal touches transformed identical equipment into something uniquely their own, offering a rare sense of individuality in a war where replacement soldiers constantly rotated through units. The steel M1 helmet itself remained one of the few pieces of equipment largely unchanged from earlier conflicts. While it provided valuable protection from shrapnel and falling debris, it was heavy and trapped heat beneath the tropical sun. Sweat poured from underneath the liner, soaking headbands within minutes. During long movements, some soldiers loosened the chin strap or left it unfastened entirely, accepting the risk because a tightly secured helmet could become painfully uncomfortable over an entire day of marching. Inside every rucksack was a carefully organized collection of necessities. Ponchos served not only as rain protection but also as emergency shelters, makeshift stretchers, sleeping covers, and improvised ground sheets. A single lightweight item often performed half a dozen different jobs. Alongside it were spare socks, insect repellent, waterproof bags protecting letters from home, flashlight batteries wrapped to prevent accidental discharge, cleaning kits, medical supplies, and whatever personal items each man considered essential. Few pieces of equipment were as universally appreciated as the machete. Officially issued jungle-cutting tools allowed patrols to clear bamboo, thick vines, and dense undergrowth that could slow movement to a crawl. Yet experienced patrol leaders quickly learned that excessive cutting left obvious trails an enemy could easily follow. Instead, point men searched constantly for natural gaps in the vegetation, using machetes only when absolutely necessary. Every swing risked making noise, exposing fresh-cut vegetation, or exhausting valuable energy. The jungle attacked equipment just as relentlessly as it attacked the men carrying it. Leather molded, cotton mildewed, metal rusted overnight, radio batteries lost power in the humidity, maps dissolved if not properly waterproofed, and ammunition magazines required constant inspection to prevent corrosion. Even simple items like bootlaces, canteen covers, and backpack straps gradually deteriorated under continuous exposure to heat, rain, mud, and sunlight. Medical problems became another invisible battle. Mosquitoes carried malaria in many regions despite widespread use of insect repellent and preventive medication. Leeches clung silently to boots and trousers during river crossings. Ants invaded resting positions within minutes. Fungal infections spread across feet, groins, and underarms where damp clothing rubbed constantly against skin. Combat medics treated these conditions daily because even minor infections could reduce a soldier's ability to march, climb, or fight. Veterans often remembered that success depended less on having perfect equipment than on maintaining the equipment they had. Boots were dried whenever possible. Rifles were cleaned repeatedly throughout the day. Socks were changed at every opportunity. Metal parts received fresh lubricant before patrols. Water was rationed carefully. Experienced non-commissioned officers constantly inspected younger soldiers, correcting small problems before they became dangerous ones. These habits rarely appeared in dramatic war films, but they saved lives just as surely as marksmanship or battlefield tactics. Over time, official supply systems also adapted. Improved tropical uniforms made with ripstop fabric resisted tearing better than earlier versions. Nylon load-bearing equipment gradually replaced moisture-absorbing cotton web gear. Better jungle boots incorporated stronger materials and more durable soles. Research conducted by the Army's Natick Laboratories and Quartermaster specialists reflected thousands of observations gathered directly from soldiers operating in Vietnam. Much of what became standard equipment for future generations of American infantry traced its origins to these hard-earned lessons. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all was that no piece of gear, no matter how advanced, could overcome the environment by itself. Vietnam forced military planners to recognize that climate, terrain, and logistics could be just as decisive as weapons. A rifle only mattered if it functioned after days of rain. Boots only mattered if they kept a soldier moving. Uniforms only mattered if they allowed men to endure weeks in oppressive heat without collapsing from exhaustion or infection. When veterans looked back on Vietnam, many remembered firefights and helicopter assaults. But just as many remembered the endless rain, the crushing weight of overloaded packs, the constant maintenance of their weapons, and the daily struggle against an environment that never stopped testing them. Their gear was more than equipment. It was shelter, survival, burden, and lifeline all at once. The Vietnam War permanently changed how the United States Army designed clothing, footwear, weapons maintenance procedures, load-bearing systems, and tropical field equipment. Lessons learned through hardship influenced generations of military development long after the last American combat troops departed Southeast Asia. Every improved jungle boot, every lighter combat vest, every moisture-resistant fabric, and every field manual emphasizing preventive maintenance carried the imprint of soldiers who had discovered, often at great personal cost, what truly worked in one of the harshest combat environments of the 20th century. For the American grunt, the jungle never offered easy victories. It demanded endurance, adaptation, and constant attention to the smallest details. In the end, survival depended not only on courage under fire, but on the boots beneath their feet, the rifle in their hands, and the hard-earned knowledge that in Vietnam, even the smallest piece of gear could mean the difference between making it home or becoming another name remembered only by those who marched beside them.